That's thank you. And we still do not have a student representative.
Thank you, America. I appreciate all that you do for us. Item 1.3 is public comment, and I will open for public comment after I read a statement. It says, due to the current state of the emergency declared by the governor, members of the public wishing to make public comment about an item on the agenda must submit their comments via email at shsccommittee@washouschools.net. Any public comment received will be forwarded to the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission for its consideration, consistent to the emergency provisions noted above. Do we have any public comment?
No, Chair Benton, there is no public comment at this time.
Thank you. Item 1.4 is an action item to adopt the agenda. We'll open it up to a motion to adopt the agenda.
Jim Nadeau moves to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Jim. Looking for a second.
Lorraine Benuto moves to second.
Thank you, Lorraine. With a motion to accept the agenda, we'll take action. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're going to move on to item 2, which is items for presentation, discussion, and or possible action. Item 2.1 is approval of the February 3rd, 2020 minutes of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission. Looks like
Charlene Bybee move to the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission approve the minutes from February 3rd, 2020.
Thank you, Charlene. And looking for a second.
Diane, second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this item that needs to happen? Anybody have anything they? Yes, Misty.
Not burning. I already sent an email to America on my name misspelling, so I hope that can just be fixed within the movement of acceptance of the agenda.
Awesome.
I will correct.
Charlene, are you okay with that amendment to the?
Yes, absolutely.
And Amber, since you were the seconder, are you okay with that?
Yes, sounds good. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we have a motion. So all those in favor of accepting the minutes from February 3rd, 2020, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Thank you all. Item 2.2 is approval of the minutes from March 2, 2020 of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission. We'll just be looking for a motion.
I, Diane Nicolette, move to approve the March 2nd meeting minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane.
Coretta Patterson for the second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.3 is approval of the minutes from October 12th, 2020 of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission.
Jim Nadeau moves for approval of the October 12th, 2020 meeting of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
Lorraine Benuto moves to second.
Thank you, Lorraine. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Hey,
Aye.
Scott, I'm sorry, I need to abstain. I was not in attendance at the October 12th meeting, so mark me as an abstention. Thank you.
America, did you get that?
I did. I will mark that.
Awesome, thank you. So I think that carries unanimously with Charlene abstaining from voting. So I'm going to move item 2.4. So that's a presentation from the Board of Trustees, and President Raymond wants to be here. She will be able to log in with us at 2:15. So if you guys are in agreement, we are going to come back to item 2.4 when she's available. So we will move to item 2.5, which is presentation and discussion of the school safety audits and contract with the Safety Advisory Council. This is for a presentation and discussion only. And it looks like our presenters are with us, and that's Chief Jason Trevino and our emergency manager, Roy Anderson. And then it looks like we get to meet Mr. Michael Perry, who's our school safety specialist.
And thank you, Chair Benton, Superintendent Dr. McNeil, esteemed members. So Roy Anderson, Emergency Manager for Washoe County School District Police, sorry. What I want to do is just kind of briefly overview what the School Safety Advocacy Council has done in the past. We'll start with the history of it. Their contract started in 2016. There was a comprehensive assessment of the district safety measures, procedures. They provided 50 recommendations to enhance safety here with Washoe County schools. A few of the examples of some of the recommendations that were already completed been like the single point of entry that we were able to complete with the elementary schools, middle schools, the implementation of a visitor management system, so using Lobby Guard for our visitor management system. There's also an update that we just completed this year to the school-based emergency operations plan and the template that my department does to provide out to the schools so that schools can complete their school-based emergency operation plans. An example of some of the enhancements that are still in progress is like the door numbering project that we're in the middle of looking at how we're going to complete that. The School Safety Advocacy Council had 4 one-year contracts. So in those 4 one-year contracts, they assessed approximately 59 schools and administrative buildings. They conducted student forums on safety, conducted parent forums on safety. They also conducted focus groups with the principals. Year 4 was the last year, so that was right towards the tail end of this past school year when COVID hit. And unfortunately, they still need to conduct 2 principal or administrator focus groups that from previously assessed schools. So that's actually work that is still out there that does need to be completed. Moving forward, so year number 5, their contract, there's still 42 schools that need assessment. The original plan was for year 5. The contract itself was originally pitched or submitted at $120,000. But that was then asked to be cut down to $100,000. And then part of the plan for that was to have a new school safety specialist. So Michael Perry, who goes by Perry, that's on the call with us today, was to work with School Safety Advocacy Council and then, learn their assessment model, see how it's done. And then once Perry learned what was going on, take that and then, make it our own and how we could continue moving forward. The plan was also to conduct 16 new school assessments. So 16 out of the 42 that still needed to be assessed. Conduct 8 school revisits. So ones that have already been assessed, we're going to go back and revisit, see if anything's been completed, how the update would look, and then conduct 2 principal or administrator focus groups, again, from the previously assessed schools. With the onset of COVID, obviously we've had, just like everything else, we've had to adjust what our plan was. So without the contract in place, what we've been doing is Perry has developed his own assessment tools. And this tool is based on the reports from the School Safety Advocacy Council, and then utilizing and taking a look at like Department of Homeland Security tools from the Readiness Emergency Management in Schools, or what's called REMS, and then other industry best practices. So taking those reports and different tools, he was able to generate and create his own assessment tool. And we're currently in the beta testing mode of that. So Perry has completed assessments of 2 middle schools, 2 elementary schools, actually just completed one last week, and then 1 high school, so we can see how the tool works, how we're going to utilize the reports, and then how best to report it out. So that is the update for our School Safety Advocacy Council and what we're doing to move forward in lieu of not having a contract in place.
Thank you, Roy. I appreciate that. We'll open it up for any discussion from the commission. Ms. Bybee, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question on our door numbering, which was supposed to be our low-hanging fruit 4 years ago, and what the holdup is, what our, how far along are we? Do we only have the one elementary, or do we have more schools, and kind of what's the timeline on hoping to get that door numbering system in place? Thank you.
Sure. And I actually do not have the answer to that right now. I do apologize, but I can seek the answer and get it back to the commission here shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Roy, I have a question.
Yes.
We did ask about that earlier this year. I'm remembering, Charlene, right?
Yeah.
Just the record to show that we're asking again.
Yeah, this is Chief Trevino, and if I remember correctly, Adam Searcy actually came back to the commission and explained what had kind of happened with that, and a lot of it had to do with the amount of dollars it actually turned out to be to do the door numbering properly versus just slapping a cheap vinyl sticker up. The cost was a lot more when we started talking about the materials used for longevity, actually having them installed on the buildings, as well as we figured out that on a lot of the doors, you couldn't just put a number on it because they weren't even visible from the exterior of the school. So then we started having to utilize the metal tents that were affixed to the building. Some of those little metal tents have to be affixed to stonework or masonry, which obviously then there's an included cost in that. But I believe that Mr. Searcy actually did come back and give that update.
Thanks, Jason.
Diane, looks like you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, Jason. Hello, Roy.
Hello.
2 questions very quickly, and then I will mute myself. Is Jason, Chief Trevino, how are you feeling about the door numbering process? Do you feel it's not as important as we originally had discussed at several meetings? Number 2, for Roy, not to critique so much as to be champions as the Safe and Healthy Schools commissioners. I would really appreciate it if Mr. Perry would share his safety checklist that you're beta testing so that we can be familiar with it.
Absolutely.
This is Chief Trevino. So my stance hasn't changed on the door numbering project. I think it's a very valid project. In fact, myself and Deputy Chief Price were just discussing it quite recently, actually. I think it's still a very valid project. We actually had great feedback from the other first responder agencies in the Valley when we took them over and showed them our prototype school. They thought it was very valuable as well. And we actually had an incident where at that school where we utilized it. So I do think it's a very worthwhile project. It's just a matter of, getting the funding allocated and getting it done.
And as far as sharing the tool with you, absolutely be more than happy to do so. We were just kind of making sure that it worked for what our needs were before we shared it out, but we can share it out now and receive feedback on it prior to that.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Roy. I do believe that you are, you're blessed. I feel blessed to be surrounded by a bunch of experts sitting at this table, and I do believe some input, not to slow things down, because we don't need any of that these days, especially, but to just, help us become familiar and be advocates for you.
Absolutely, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Jim, I saw your hand up, so Jim, it's going to you.
I'm sorry, were you talking to me?
Yes, the floor is yours.
For a second. On, I think last month, and Superintendent Neal may correct me, but I think last month on the 13th of October agenda, I believe that there was a budget request or an approval request for several schools to have the numbering system installed. And I received an email back from Mr. Searcy that indicated that that they bid prices had come in much lower than expected and they were pushing forward. I can't remember how many schools there were, but I think they are moving forward on it.
Thank you, Commissioner Nadeau. I don't have that agenda right there in front of me, and I don't have the actual consent item, but we can check into that and see which schools and how many schools were there.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any other discussion on this item? All right, thank you to Roy, Chief Trevino, and Perry for the presentation. That was item 2.5. We are going to go back to item 2.4 now that President Raymond is with us. Item 2.4 is presentation of appreciation and support from the Board of Trustees. This is for presentation and discussion only. President Raymond, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the very formal agenda item and presentation, but I want to keep this informal just to be here and really express my sincere thanks to all of you for taking the time to be part of this incredibly important committee and commission for our school district. The work you do has such really immediate and impactful presence on our schools and on our students and staff in particular. We just are so appreciative that you all volunteer your time to take part in this, and really look forward always to hearing more about the work that you're doing. It really is not just important to our kids and our students, but it's important to us as a board to know that we have a group of dedicated volunteers who are really taking on such important topics. And you all have such expertise in your areas and bring such an important perspective to the table. So just thank you all very much. I know it's hard to not be in person and to have to do this over Zoom. I wish I could be there in person to thank you all, but great work, and really just keep it up. Keep it up for us and keep it up for our kids. We need you, and we appreciate the help.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we appreciate the work that you guys do. All right, so we will move on to item 2.6, which is presentation and discussion by staff on the National School Psychology Week to highlight the important work school psychologists and educators do to help our students thrive. This is for information and discussion only, and it looks like our presenter today is Brandy Olson. Brandy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Brandy Olson. I am the coordinator of psychological services, and with me I also have Brian Mole, one of our school psychologists, and Andy Haycock, one of our school psychologists. I'd like to thank Superintendent Dr. McNeil and the Commission for their time today. Next week, November 9th through the 13th, is National School Psych Week. This year's theme is the power of possibility, which conveys hope, growth, resilience, and renewal, which is very applicable and appropriate for the times we're in right now. School psychologists, just to give you some background, school psychologists receive advanced graduate preparation relevant to both psychology and education. They complete a master's educational specialist or doctoral level program in school psychology and are licensed by the Department of Education. They are trained to provide academic and behavioral interventions, mental health supports, evaluation, assessment, and data analysis, consultation with teachers and families, culturally responsive services, and crisis prevention and response. As you can see, school psychologists wear many hats. Within Washoe County School District, they are members in the multi-tiered systems of support process and help to identify interventions for both academically and social emotionally at-promise students. They also promote MTSS, social emotional learning, positive behavior interventions and supports, restorative practices, and trauma-informed practices. They work with other mental health professionals in the schools, such as counselors and social workers, to act as a cohesive mental health team. They support school safety, which includes behavioral health management, crisis response, threat inquiry, consultation, and facilitating threat assessments. They also help support students transitioning from residential treatment centers, correctional centers, and other alternative settings by working with school teams to develop safety plans and ensuring needed academic and behavioral supports are in place. School psychologists conduct initial and 3-year reevaluations for students with special needs, including child find at private schools, children that are homeschooled, and for children who are enrolled in our public schools. They have also developed a specialized team to support schools with autism evaluations. They collaborate and build relationships with community partners such as UCAN and LEND and various mental health providers. They provide mental health and academic consultation to administrators, staff, parents, and community mental health providers. During distance learning, school psychologists continue to support staff and students through consultation regarding student needs, connecting staff and students to community resources, and providing direct support to students. They also work to complete special education eligibility reports and requirements to the extent possible. School psychologists also served on various committees to help with the reopening. Since the return to in-person learning, school psychologists have resumed direct assessments of students, whether those students are in-person, distance learners, or homeschool students. They worked with their school teams to complete the hundreds of special education evaluations and eligibilities that were carried over from the spring. They provide consultation to staff and families and direct supports to students. Some of our school psychologists are providing social skills groups and anxiety support groups. School psychologists are appreciative of the district and building level consideration of their return. They want to thank you for the provision of PPE and plexiglass for them. It was challenging for them, as it was for everyone, to work remotely. They're glad to be back in their schools, working directly with staff, students, and families.
Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate that. Paul.
Thank you, Chairman Benton. I just wanted to add, and thank you, Brandy, for being here. As we talked, I think at the last meeting, or maybe it was in the preparation with you and Misty, we just want you guys to be more and more aware of some of the resources that are available to students and families and staff throughout the district. School psychologists they're part and parcel of the safety teams at every building. They work very closely with school police on things such as threat assessments. And then kind of on the other side of things in terms of climate, creating the environment that optimizes student learning. They're a critical part of that team. So they have immense responsibility. Like some of our other employment groups, the ratios are to their disadvantage. They're having to serve too many folks right now. But they are a critical element, and the extent to which we can focus on mental health as a safety issue, they're going to play a key role.
Thank you, Paul, for that. I'm going to open it up to the commission if you guys have any questions or discussion.
I do.
All right, Ms. Bidey, go for it.
Yeah, Paul, what is our ratio of how many psychologists do we have in the district and how many schools are they responsible for?
Brandy, why don't you take that?
We have 47 school psychologists in the district. They serve both our Child Find Center, so the evaluations that are done for kids before they enter our schools, ages 3 to 5, all the way through the high school. Depending on the size of the school, kind of influences how many schools they're responsible for. So some of our school psychologists that serve some of our larger high schools have one school, while some of our school psychologists that serve just elementary schools may have 2 to 3 schools.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion?
Diane here. I am curious, two things to further deep dive that, because my guess is the numbers are rather phenomenal. Maybe you don't do it exactly this way, but how many students to each counselor? And second question, what have you found to be a positive impact of this new way of doing business?
Our ratios vary a little bit. So if you serve if a school psychologist serves multiple buildings, I try to keep them around 1,500 students. But North Valleys has one school psychologist, Spanish Springs High School has one school psychologist. So obviously their ratios are a little bit higher. Brian or Andy, do you want to weigh in on that question or Diane's second question?
Historically, I think most of us have had upwards of 1,500 to 2,000 students per psychologist.
I guess I'll take question two. So, I think that we're still kind of, I use the phrase like kind of we're building the plane as we fly it, as we're kind of like figuring out some of the challenges that we're facing and how we can best serve our students who are participating in distance learning, as well as our students who are in person. So we're adjusting, just like everybody else, and also trying to help support people as they try to adjust to this new way of school.
Let me add, and hopefully I'm accurate in saying this, Brandy will tell me if I'm wrong, but the school psychologists are a critical part of like our safety team. So when we talk about, and we'll hear a little bit from Trish Schaefer later, but our multi-tiered systems of support processes where we're really talking about a particular child and their needs, that will include a teacher, it'll include administrator, it'll probably include counselor, and often it'll also include the psychologist. So the psychologist comes from a very unique perspective and they have an awful lot to add. So those ratios are a little deceiving. I mean, it's probably incredibly hard to handle the caseloads they have, but they offer indirect support in a variety of ways.
I saw Coretta's hand up, so Coretta.
So I wonder what do our ratios look like when you compare with ratios nationally, and are there openings currently that aren't filled for additional psychologists?
We currently are fully staffed. Nationally, it really varies. The East Coast usually has smaller ratios than as you move further west. The recommended ratios by the National Association of School Psychologists is one school psych to 500 to 750 students.
All right, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Andy, for joining us. I appreciate the presentation. We are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 2.7.
Chair Bitten.
Yes, ma'am.
So just really quickly, I just wanted to, do a shout out. The school psychs, they know that I'm going to say this, but they know that my mom was a retired school psychologist. She actually started the Child Find program here in the state of Nevada. So child psychologists are near and dear to my heart. They provide our, not only our students, but as well, when we went into shutdown, our school psychologists stepped up to the plate and provided our staff members with social emotional supports as well too. And just as Dr. LaMarca stated, they are truly integral to our school systems of support. So just thank you so much, Brandy and team, Brian. You guys are near and dear to our hearts. So thank you for everything that you do, and Andrew as well.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil.
Thank you. So item 2.7, and I don't want you guys to think we're rushing through it. We just have a hefty agenda. So I want to make sure that all the presentations are being met and the discussions are being had. Item 2.7 is a presentation and discussion of staff wellness and its relationship to student wellness and academic learning. This is for presentation and discussion only. Catherine, is this your presentation? Am I
I
reaching out
believe
to you?
Trish Schaefer, I think, is leading this presentation. Is that correct, Trish?
Yeah, it's a joint effort with Brandy, Catherine, and I.
Awesome. I will pass the ball to you, Trish.
Thank you, Chair Benton and Superintendent McNeil. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Trish Schaefer, and I have the privilege of supporting social emotional learning, restorative practices, multi-tiered system of supports, or you heard MTSS in the previous presentation, and behavioral health and management for our district. And I'd like to introduce my colleagues who are also presenting with me. I'll turn it over to Brandy and Catherine.
Hi, I'm Brandy Olson, Coordinator of Psychological Services.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see all of you again. I'm Catherine Loudon, and I coordinate school counseling and our emerging school social work program. And I'm here to also support and respond to any questions that you might have related to this.
So we wanted to spend some time today talking to you about the work we've done as a district around staff wellness and social emotional learning. So could you go to the next slide for me? Thank you. So teachers' level of stress is directly correlated with student achievement. So teachers who support high levels of stress, such as feelings of burnout, have difficulty coping skills, they're associated with the poorest student outcomes. So it's really important that as a district, we support our adult social and emotional learning. Social emotional learning helps children and adults succeed in academic, social, and professional life through the development of both intra and interpersonal social life skills. It is the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. The Washoe County School District has worked throughout many departments to support the social emotional wellness of staff. This includes the wellness program, equity and diversity department, the counseling department, the MTSS department, psychological services, and that's just to name a few. There's many more that have worked to support this within the district. The Washoe County School District has staff respond to climate surveys and then responds to the data. They also provide social emotional learning for adults, restorative practices, trauma-informed practices, and this includes information on secondary trauma, along with training and support in equity and diversity.
Okay, so as Brandy mentioned earlier in the presentation, that we have been paying attention to our staff work stress for a very long time. And this is just a snippet. This presentation was given by Dr. Laura Davidson and Ben Hayes to our Board of Trustees. But this is looking at our staff work stress burnout over time. And this is the results from a survey. We used to do it in the spring, but for the last 3 years, aside from this year, we did it, we opened the survey window from November to December, and we usually had a response rate of 55 to 58%. This year, knowing that things were very different, we opened it up from September 21st through October 5th. So roughly same time of year, and the response rate was similar. It was at 59%. So what you'll see here is that we had a 28% point increase in staff reporting burnout from last year to this year. So within a building, as staff's collective work stress increases, students' perception of a healthy climate decreases. Taking care of staff matters to student and social emotional well-being. So when we've been paying attention to this and nurturing this for a long time, and Brandy went over some of our efforts that we have been engaging in, but this year it became even more critical that we pay attention to it. These data also show that when staff feel more supported by their administrator and their colleagues, that's one of the larger predictors of low work stress. And then again, I mentioned the huge increase that we saw this year. And so currently 74% of staff and 83% of our teachers report feeling burnt out. And the severity of burnout has increased this year, especially amongst teachers, with 55% of our teachers not just saying that they feel burnt out, but they're strongly agreeing that they're burnt out. And I'll show you one more, the next slide, please, Paul. I think that's you. So this is just showing that same sharp increase here. And there's a couple quotes that Dr. Davidson had pulled out. But we do know from the research and from our own climate survey that we give every single year that when our teachers are feeling stressed or burnt out, we see it in our students. We see it in terms of their report on climate, and we see it in other ways in terms of outcomes, in terms of academics, behavior, and attendance. Next slide, please. So to respond to that sharp increase, we wanted to share a little bit about what we have done since March 2020. Of course, I mentioned the staff survey, and that's critical so that we know how they're doing and what we can do to help them. This is just a snippet of the efforts that we have made. Kristen has been an amazing leader and continually messaged all hands on deck, and we everyone has jumped in to provide supports for our adults. And when I say adults, I also mean our families and our students, and schools themselves are doing a tremendous amount of work. So just because you don't see something called out or highlighted here that you may know of at a building doesn't mean that we don't have ongoing efforts. So first, we looked at providing scripts, tips, and resources for our principals to provide social emotional wellness for our staff. We know that they have a wealth of knowledge, but they needed some tips to acknowledge and help their staff acknowledge their experiences and renew and reconnect and feel prepared to support one another, as well as their students and families. Going back to one of the strongest contributors to a lower stress rate is feeling supported by administration and colleagues. These supports included wordings for emails, activities that could be done virtually, in person, a variety of offerings. We also provided a collaborative training between Catherine's office and mine, where we looked at, we offered every staff member was required to take a professional learning session on secondary trauma, psychological first aid, and self-care. So we called that resilience and connection in a time of transformation. We had longer classes that were optional that built on all of those, but really helping folks understand that everyone had experienced some level of trauma during the stay-at-home time, the racial pandemic, and the financial crisis, and how the adults caring for our students and families may respond to that through secondary trauma. The psychological first aid was what they could do about it, as well as the self-care. We also offered virtual restorative circles for staff over the summer that was facilitated by our team. Any staff member from across the district could log on and participate in restorative circles to begin a healing process and also to sort of restore a sense of normalcy and connection. For our teachers and counselors, we paired scripts with resources. So we gave them ways to welcome students and families back, as well as a timeline with SEL activities and resources. We also offered curriculum and special curriculum addressing some of what was going on this year. The social emotional learning community was incredible and was able to create a variety of scripts and videos and opportunities for students to engage in discussion around what was happening with the shutdown, the systemic racial pandemic, as well as the financial crisis. And then we also were able to provide, through Kristen's leadership and working with the state, we had 5 extra professional learning days for our folks who were able to really spend some time preparing on how they were going to welcome back our families in schools. Next slide, please. We also created a teacher team hotline. So any teacher or any staff member across the district who is supporting or experiencing a need and or experiencing a student with severe behavior needs, they're able to reach out immediately and get assistance without doing a ton of paperwork. We have regular distribution of tools and resources to support mental wellness, as we've kind of just given you a quick overview. Through Delisa Crane's leadership, she's over Family School Partnership. We've offered virtual classes on a variety of different things, but the first one was keeping kids safe and healthy during the school year. So how families can welcome their students back and not only keep them physically safe, but activities and things that can be done at home to keep them emotionally safe. We did the virtual back to school expo, which focused on mental and emotional wellness. And then we've done a lot of videos for our families to support daily activities to help them increase the resiliency and some concrete ways in terms of how they can foster emotional wellness in their homes. And then lastly, since March, we've had a behavioral wellness hotline for families. So any family member can call in and receive any help from our behavior expert team. And that's everything from dealing with a child who might be struggling to stay organized to more extreme behaviors where we're looking at safety and safety protocols and or behavioral plans in the home. So those are just a quick snippet of things that we've been doing to respond to help keep our adults, and again, that includes not only our staff, but we really think about our whole community and our families to keep their social emotional well-being at the forefront so that they can help care for our students.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. So we are continuing to move forward with upcoming social emotional wellness activities. Tiffany Young from Equity and Diversity has kind of started the facilitation of affinity groups. We have other district leaders who will be facilitating those groups. Those groups will support staff learning and growth about cultural and systemic inequities that impact our community. So we'll have some pretty frank discussions and learning in those groups. We've also provided and will provide the talking about election resources. This election has pretty strong feelings on both sides, and there's some anxiety around that for both our staff and students. So we provided some resources for staff to use regarding that. We have professional learning and support on 11/3, which is tomorrow. It's really a building-based professional learning. So buildings can determine how to best support their staff and their social emotional learning tomorrow. Staff can complete the psychological first aid, which will be easier now that we have completed the trainer of trainers for that. We're going to continue our work on trauma-sensitive schools, so schools can implement trauma-sensitive practices in their buildings. We had a trauma conference scheduled for last spring. Obviously, that had to get rescheduled. We are hoping to have it rescheduled for this coming spring to continue to give schools, teachers, just resources and tips to use when dealing with our kids that are dealing with so much trauma in their lives right now. Continuing to give information regarding secondary trauma. Our staff is impacted by the trauma that their students are dealing with every day. So just reminding them and giving them tools to support themselves, some self-care, recognizing the signs of secondary trauma and how to care for themselves. And then just continuing to support our schools that are dealing with a lot of anxiety. So anything we can help to do with communication or supporting them, we will continue to do. Next slide, please. So some of our principles as we work with schools is really flexibility, recognizing that you know, we're not perfect, extending that grace to others, making sure that we realize everyone is doing their best that they can. So giving ourselves grace and helping others give themselves grace too. School teams want to do their best for their students, and sometimes they're really hard on themselves when things don't go exactly right. So really want to help them give themselves some grace and kindness. Having that trusting space to have difficult conversations. Lots of things going on in the political sphere right now, the racial pandemic. So making sure that we have a trusting environment where staff feel comfortable learning and growing and challenging through those conversations. Making sure that we set aside time to appreciate one another and celebrate one another. It's a really challenging time, so want to make sure we always celebrate things that are going well, and making sure that our staff are taking care of themselves. So sharing information regarding self-care, helping them align that in both their school and their home lives, just so that they can help minimize the burnout and give their students what they need as well.
We knew there was a packed agenda, so we tried to go quick and keep it at a 30,000 foot level for you, just to let you know some of the work that we've been doing especially since March. But we are very lucky that we've been engaging in a lot of this work for a long time now, which made it easy for us to roll into more intensive supports. We are very, very fortunate that we didn't have to orient people to social emotional wellness, because that's a language that we've been speaking for a decade. And when Dr. McNeil prioritized social emotional wellness for our students and our staff in March of 2020, we all knew what that meant, and we were able to put action to it because we had common language and we had been engaging in it for quite some time. So we were able to ramp up. And our efforts have been recognized. They were recognized in Forbes magazine this year, and we've been doing a lot of good work, and we plan to continue to do the work to support our staff and our students.
Thank you, Trish and Brandy. I will speak on this. This is an item that was near and dear to both mine and Misty's heart when we were preparing for today's agenda. So seeing the work that you guys do reinforces that we are working with some of the best people in our school district. So I appreciate seeing the work that we're doing to take care of our staff. I think if we can't take care of our staff, how can we take care of our children? So I really appreciate that conversation that we just heard about. I'm going to open it up. Misty, if you have anything, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Trevin. I'm just really grateful to see all the wonderful work. I concur with the chair. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, and keep doing the great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We're going to open it up for discussion. Ms. Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that I'm encouraged by what you just presented to us and how many things you are doing. And having been on this commission since its inception, Safe and Healthy Schools, we've really been focused a lot on the physical, single point of entry, the perimeter fencing, the Columbine locks, all the physical attributes, because we were responding to school shootings and to danger, physical danger on our campuses. And that's kind of was our big focus initially. And we've always had the other, the bullying, suicide, the mental health side of it. But I don't recall that we've ever really looked at taking that further and looking at our staff. We've always, in my mind, I've always been thinking of the students and their families, and probably teachers were part of it, but I didn't see the focus there. So I appreciate, especially today, I mean, the world right now since March, and I think that's why our times are so, there's so much intensity and so much, people are so stressed. People are over their COVID fatigue. They're stressed sometimes financially. They're stressed because we're tired of lockdown. We're tired of our whole way of life being changed, and we can't live our lives like we've lived them. And the pressure on even people who are pretty stable has been really intense for every one of us. And you see the fallout of that in so many things, politics adding to it, the racial unrest, but it just kind of is a perfect storm that just there's not anybody I know who really feels like they're in a happy place right now, you know, and it's hard to, and I'm a perennial optimist, so it's hard to even for me to kind of find that glass half full because the times are just so overwhelming. So the work you're doing is critically important, and I'm excited to see that that is including staff and teachers and all of your staff, because the environment that you are working in and having a whole career trapped in an airplane at 36,000 feet, I know how in that confined space you can create an environment that's toxic, or you can create one that's positive and it affects everybody around you. So everyone is included in our mental health and social emotional, you know, place that we are today. And I thank you for the work you're doing. I think it's critically important for all of us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcy, did you have your hand up?
There we go.
There you go.
I wanted to ask Dr. McNeil about, I was reading the comments in that presentation from the teachers, and I'm wondering, has there been any positive feedback from the teachers specifically? Because I'm thinking, well, not only does it affect the teacher, but it affects the teacher's family and the teacher's secondary family. And, you know, and there's just like this chain reaction. I have a friend who's a teacher, and she got tested, but that affected all of us because we're all together most of the time. So, and I was just wondering if there's been any positive feedback from the teachers. Thank you, Dr. McNeil.
No, I appreciate the question, Commissioner Burke. And yes, I mean, that survey was probably one of our most received surveys as far as the number of responses. We had 3,900 responses, but what we wanted to make sure is that we were exceptionally transparent with, some of the hard language, that it's hard to read. Those comments are hard to read, but we also knew that if we put, some of the more positive responses, that it may not be seen as, okay, you guys have some stuff that you guys need to work on. So we wanted to put, as I've told the trustees, and Dr. LaMarca knows this, the good, the bad, and the ugly out there. And, Ben and Paul and I'm going to say that Trish is being extremely humble. Trish is a national leader, as you all know, in social emotional learning. And the lift that she has undertaken with her and her team, and Catherine Loudon. Catherine just did a symposium last week on teen suicide, and making sure that it's not seen as a stigma for mental health. So there are teachers that feel that the work that they are doing is difficult. It's hard. There are long days. Our teachers are working 10 and 12-hour days, but they know that they're doing it for all the right reasons. So I will just say that there's a lot of positive out there, but just as Commissioner Bybee was talking about, I have it on my whiteboard right here, tenacious optimism. And that's what we have to have every day, is tenacious optimism.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Benton, looks like Coretta's hand is up.
Okay.
No? Okay.
No. Thank you. I don't know how to express gratitude to all of you for the work that you do. I now see after your presentation, Trish, that we are taking care of our teachers, which is amazing to see. So I appreciate the work that you do, Catherine, the work that you do, Brandy, the work that you do. And I think it starts at the top. If our leadership at the top is wanting to push this out, it's going to be seen as though we care. And I think that I just saw that we care. And when I say we, I really mean you guys care. So thank you for all the work that you guys are doing to keep our teachers safe and keep their mental health at the forefront of some of the decisions that we're making.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Absolutely. All right, with that, it looks like there's no other discussion, so we'll move to item 2.8, which is an update on school reopening efforts related to COVID-19 pandemic, including steps taken to open schools and information provided to the Board of Trustees at the October 13th, 2020 meeting of the Board of Trustees, which includes information on the direction on the lessons learned during the reopening of schools for 2020 to 2021 school year. This is for this presentation and discussion, and it looks like Dr. Lamarca is our presenter.
Thank you, Chairman Benton. Members of the commission, Dr. McNeil, for the record, Paul Lamarca, Chief Strategies Officer. And I do want to say real quickly, thank you to Trish and the whole team for those earlier discussions. I think they're critically important. And they're actually very related to this discussion, because I do think this is kind of the elephant in the room right now that's creating much of the anxiety that many of us are having to endure. So this is, I'm going to be brief. This is a presentation we shared with the Board of Trustees last Tuesday. It's similar to what was presented on October 13th. As I believe you all know, the Board of Trustees is using as one of the tools in its tool chest, the TMRPA, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency COVID-19 Risk Meter. This is updated daily. And really, this is kind of like the primary page. It gives you an overall rating of the community based on a variety of indicators. I will say, and we knew that this last week, that it was likely, but in the last 3 days, we've actually ticked up to, as a community as a whole, to the very high risk region. These are the indicators that the risk meter uses. COVID risk assessments really is an indicator of how many people are seeking to get tests because they are concerned that they may have contracted the virus. COVID test positivity, this is really the percentage of folks who test positive based on those who actually seek a test. Daily cases per 100,000. That's just converting the number of cases we're seeing on a 7-day average to 100,000 individuals. Then we've got 2 hospital indicators. We have specific interventions due to COVID. This is really use of hospital beds and ICU beds directly related to COVID. And then the 5th indicator is general hospital use. And that can be, you know, those are other beds being used for different reasons, such as a heart attack or a different flu. That indicator, the last indicator, has actually gone up in the last couple of days, part of why we have slipped over into the red region. Those are critical indicators. They're lagging, but we have to be able to take care of our entire community. So I think the city of Reno mayor and her commission around COVID, and this group, the Truckee Meadows group, which is a subset of that, felt very strongly that overall hospitalizations was key. We are providing, as a school district, data. We're uploading it 3 times a week. We get all this information from the Washoe County Health District. We will update it again tomorrow. Our last update, and again, this was from the presentation last Tuesday. So our last update did show that we are in the very high risk region. I think our score right now is 9.5. But again, you see average daily cases per 100,000. Test positivity, that's creeped up a little bit. It's at 9.3 right now. We also look at school-age children throughout Washoe County. I need to emphasize that this includes children that are attending charter schools, private schools, that are being homeschooled. So there's many of these kids that are not in the Washoe County School District. We have seen some increases among these populations, and I'll show a slide to that effect in a moment. And then down at the bottom of this, we do show sort of school district, school-specific cases. And the real difference between sort of this level of information and the one above it is to be included in this, we're talking about a student or staff that were in buildings while infectious. And so sometimes we've received some questions about the correspondence or correlation between the two data sources. And I think that's part of it. If for example, I become ill over the weekend, but I've never been in the school that I work at, it's not going to show up on this bottom tier as a school specific case. This is a different way of looking at new cases per 100,000. This is weekly rates. I will tell you that we want to see this below 100 per 100,000. And you see in the last several weeks that it has really gone up quite a bit. This is community-wide data. This is not school district data. This is a graph of average daily cases per 100,000. It's a little bit different than the last slide, which was weekly cases. The blue line is the population that's 19 years of age and older. The orange line is the population that's 11 to 18 years of age. The green line are kids that are 5 to 10 years of age. That corresponds with our elementary population. The orange line loosely corresponds to our high school population. However, at this stage of the year, the majority of 18-year-olds are probably UNR students if they're going to school. And then the yellow line are very young children. And this, we include some very young children within our preschool programs. So you do see that cases have been rising with every group in recent weeks, but it's most pronounced in that adult population. And within that population, it looks like it's really the 19-year-olds to 30-year-olds where we're seeing the increase as a community. I'm going to kind of leave it at there for questions. There's maybe a couple of other slides that we can answer or we can use to answer questions if you have any. I will say, and I don't know, Dr. McNeil may want to weigh in. We have always approached this, or I should say the Board of Trustees has always approached this as a community issue. The fact that our schools are open is a benefit to the community. It's obviously a benefit to our students. And it's really critical that the community, everyone in the community, myself included, we do our part to try to mitigate the spread so that we can remain safely open to children and to adults. So anyways, I'm gonna leave it for questions at this point.
Are there any questions for Dr. LaMarca? Commissioner Burke, the floor is yours.
I want to know at what point in this graph, how much higher do we go before we shut them down again?
I'll start. Of course, that would be a Board of Trustees decision. And the Board of Trustees, I believe it was the first meeting in September, did take some action. We had several consecutive meetings where we were looking at different data sources and trying to find tools that they could use to help them make some decisions about opening or remaining open or moving to full distance. That's a really difficult question to answer. So the action they took is essentially that if we see an uptick and we're in the very high risk region for up to about a week, then they're obligated to have an item where we come to them, we discuss with professionals what's contributing to the increases. We look at some of the school age data as a complement to the community-wide data to see the extent to which what we're seeing community-wide is mirrored in the school district. And then the Board of Trustees has to make its mind up regarding whether or not it'll make a change to learning models. I will say, and I'm sure you all are tied to the news as well, that as we see more and more kind of stringent mitigation efforts occurring, especially in the European nations, what you are seeing is that they are keeping schools open, even though they are shutting down businesses and much of what's occurring in the community. I don't know, Kristen, if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I appreciate that, Paul. So just quickly, for our board meeting next Tuesday, this is a standing item, so it will be on there for the board to discuss. And just to reiterate what Dr. LaMarca was speaking about, when you take a look at the studies that are starting to come out, what they're seeing, in fact, you saw that in the CDC recommendations that came out today, that family spread within the households is becoming a concern. And so people are starting to take a look at what mitigation efforts can we do within our household. So if you have tested positive, then isolating within your own household. We have not seen within our schools the concept spread as we have out in the community. As you all know, last Wednesday, the governor asked myself and the superintendent of Clark County, as well as the state superintendent, Mr. Dick from the Washoe County Health District, and the corresponding representative down in Clark County, the health district officer, to talk about mitigation efforts. Obviously, we are working very closely with the health district, but mitigation efforts, in addition to face coverings, hand washing, social distancing, but also contact tracing and testing. We know the health district has a very robust testing program, but as well as Renown. And so we have a testing program with Renown for our employees, that if an employee needs to be tested, we can do that with no charge through the program that we have with Renown.
Any other questions for Dr. LaMarca?
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Dr. LaMarca. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the information being shared with us. Our last discussion item is just item 2.9. It's discussion of potential commission goals and objective for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year, including the safety forum and possible action to solicit input from the members on areas of focus and potential strategies. So this is for possible action. In preparation for this meeting, Misty, Paul, and I talked about what our goals are for, or maybe not what our goals are, but asking the commission what direction we want to go as a whole. In previous years, we focused on the safety of buildings, that sort of thing. And I don't want to say that we've accomplished all of that, but I think with the pandemic that we're living in, maybe there is a shift the board or the commission desires to look at some other items, some that were presented on today. I know my passion is the mental health right now. I think we have the ability to dive into that a little bit more now that some of the perimeter safety things of the schools are being taken care of. So I just wanted to open it up to everybody to get some feedback and discussion on what our goals are. And then also it looks like Megan is with us, so we can talk about the safety forum as well, as that is a priority of this commission. Commissioner Sanchez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to just second what you just said with regard to mental health. It's just so important, and so important not only that the great presentation today highlighted for students, but also staff and family, just given the community and the way that COVID has really affected, I know a lot of the folks that I've been in contact with. Mental health is really at the forefront for me. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Commissioner Bybee.
I would echo the same feelings. As I thought about this item, it's kind of even looking at the safety forum. we're in a whole different, whole different place that we've never, on rivers we've never navigated on before. And so I think kind of as we look as a community, as a nation, and as this commission, we're all learning the new keyword is pivot. And I think pivoting to what the needs are currently. And part of that's hard because we don't know, we still don't know so much about this virus, about vaccines, about treatments for it, about what restrictions. It's hard to even plan into January, let alone next spring or next summer. I think we all hope that we're through this for the most part, or at least on the other side of things, but we don't know. So I think it's hard to really determine what our needs are going to be. So I think the more responsive we can be for the rest of this year on a month-to-month basis of what we need to be doing, what we can be doing, what we can provide the school district and our families and our staff to help all of us get through that. And I think I'm seeing it all on the mental health side, the emotional side, and the health side of the actual pandemic itself. So that does present the other, that other challenge of mitigation measures, of safety, of education for a lot of families and a lot of communities that are being hit harder. And I'm really concerned for especially I know in our zip codes out here, and in the community, the Hispanic community is being hit harder with the pandemic. Their numbers are higher. And what can we do as a school district or as a commission of targeting education awareness, assistance? That's kind of where I think the whole focus needs to be. And the other things that we've done in the past kind of need to take a back seat, in my opinion, because they're not as top priority now. They're still important, but not what's should be on the front burner for us right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Dr. Patterson, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. So I just have a question, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place for it, but I'm still sort of hung up on the disproportionality for what the national average or the national organization's recommendation is for counselor to student ratio versus what ours is in the district. So I think everything that we're talking about sort of funnels back to, do we have enough human resources to allocate appropriately for the number of students in this district? And based on what I heard today, I'm worried that the answer to that is no. And so I don't know if there are plans in the pipeline. I don't think it is probably within the purview of this committee to deal with that, but I think that we have too few counselors and that they have to be stretched beyond imagination, and that as long as this goes on, that stretching is going to continue until the point that some of them probably break. So what are we going to do about that?
Yes, Dr. Lamarca.
I'll make a couple comments and then maybe others will want to chime in. We are very concerned about the ratios. So what you heard were the ratios for school psychologists. Catherine Loudon could also talk about the ratios for counselors. We have attendance officers and re-engagement specialists who we wish the ratios for them were smaller than they are. One thing we do need to remember is that these job areas do overlap to an extent. So we do try to approach the support for children within buildings as a team. So it is true that a psychologist is highly responsible for much of the work with an IEP evaluation for a group of kids. But in terms of supporting their mental health needs, they're part of a team that does that. So, and we work incredibly well together. The district is very good, I think, at aligning its resources because we don't have, someone mentioned that back east, some of the ratios are a little more forgiving. So are the per pupil expenditures. So it's not that the district is choosing to have these ratios and has the money to make it different. We also, I will mention, and then I'll be quiet, this is a bridge year, what we're calling a bridge year with the Board of Trustees in terms of its strategic plan. But we are heading into a season where I believe we are going to be developing a new strategic plan for the school district. And part of that process is a budget process in which, as you identify needs and resources, then you allocate additional resources. So it could be at that time some of these questions are answered by the Board of Trustees.
Thanks, Paul. And I'll just quickly add, don't need to spend too much time on it, but you all know that the legislative session starts in February. And as we all are concerned about our state's resources, we are exceptionally concerned around public education funding because we're going to be competing with all needs of the state. And part of those needs is around mental health needs. So we need to find a way to work with the legislature, work with the governor, so that we can come up with whether it's additional funding streams, you know, and that has its own implications when we're in the middle of a pandemic and both local and state revenues have dropped dramatically. So to Paul's point, we will continue to advocate for additional funding. And the board will be developing its platform in January, its legislative platform in January of this year as we go into the legislative session. But that is going to be a critical component as we put together our budget for FY22 and beyond.
Yeah, and I just have a quick comment. So I'm a clinical psychologist and professor at the university. And one of the things I think the school district has also done well to support mental health needs is just identifying agencies either for referral sources or partnerships. So as an example, I have a partnership with the school district where you know, we've located psychologists that are not funded through the school district to provide mental health services. So I think, you know, as has been mentioned multiple times with the upcoming budgetary issues that we'll probably continue to see, really leveraging community resources to support the needs of students and families is going to continue to be very important.
Thank you, Lorraine, for that. Dr. LaMarca.
I'm sorry, Scott. I wanted to mention just really quickly, excuse me, based on Member Beebe's comments, I don't have a history with the commission, but I do understand that you guys were very focused around physical safety. I want to just say to you that that's part of mental health. So it's not as if we're abandoning one thing for another thing. If you were to move in a direction where we put more emphasis around mental health, in order to meet those needs, physical and safety needs have to be met as well. The school district has done an incredible job working with the food bank and other partners in just feeding families. That's part of this whole pyramid of supports as well. So it's not as if the work that you were focused on isn't still relevant now. It's just maybe might take a different form.
You know, as I was listening just kind of to the different discussion points that, thank you, Dr. LaMarca, for bringing that in, because that was sort of running through my mind just in terms of, you know, if we think of hierarchy of needs, you know, socio-emotional, as a psychologist, I absolutely agree with all the statements about the importance of socio-emotional learning. And I think with the same token, it's really important for us to keep in mind that basic needs have to be met for families and humans to really be able to sort of focus on those higher level needs. So I think I also see them as interlinked and intertwined. So, you know, for example, food security is really important to mental health, as is economic security. And so I really like the approach of mental health being sort of a conglomeration of lots of different things and being dependent on a lot of different things.
Catherine, I saw your hand up.
Thank you so much. I would agree most certainly with Dr. LaMarca and Dr. Benuto, but I also want to remind the commission that in addition to what we as a district are providing, our district does an incredible job at collaborating on state and federal grants. And so, for example, our state just received a $10 million grant that was a collaboration between the Nevada School Counselors Association, our Nevada School Social Workers, and our Nevada School Psychologists. And that grant is one of only 5 awarded in the nation that will be looking at ratios and supporting comprehensive mental health in our state. In addition to that, our district has received multiple grants and prioritized mental health services and support. So we've hired school social workers. We received a grant for and hired 12.5 full-time school social workers. We've just launched some mental health professional positions under that. We have 7 communities and school sites that are funded partially through that, and 64 safe school professional allocations. And so as we're going forward and trying to put resources together, we're looking at all streams of funding, and our district does an incredible job. I'm always so amazed at how the supports for our schools are pieced together using state and federal and district funds.
So now I would just open it up so maybe we could talk, seeing that Megan is here, about the safety forum and possible ideas on how to move forward with that. But before I bring Megan on, Dr. McNeil, I know you had some ideas in conversation with Dr. LaMarca. He said that maybe we can combine the safety forum with another forum that the school district is doing. I don't know if...
Okay, I'm thinking that this was the mental health forum. Is that correct? Okay, all right, very good. I just wanted to make sure, but yeah, yes. I was thinking that, you know, if we can combine those two and just within the conversation of the commission, I actually think that it would make a lot of sense if we would be able to do that.
And I know when Misty and I were talking about it with Dr. LaMarca, we wanted to target the most people possible. I know in the past we've had between 100 and 150 people attending the safety forum. Megan, I don't know if our goal this year is to do it virtually, but I know Misty and I think that that might be a better target so that we have people that are still weary of the pandemic come the spring, but they have the ability to attend where they would not otherwise.
Yes, and just for those who don't know me, I'm Megan Downs, Communications Manager for the school district. Yeah, we've had a lot of success with our virtual forums this year. We've done a variety of different formats for those and still continue to have success. We've found that they really get better viewership than a lot of our in-person events. It's easier for people to get there. We have a little bit of flexibility in timing and things like that. So generally we do those over a Zoom format that we then broadcast over to our YouTube account. But if the desire is for it to be more interactive, which I'm assuming that it would be, there's ability to do that via Zoom and then create breakout groups. And that's something we can facilitate as well. And we've had a lot of success with that with some external and internal meetings. So we are happy to help, you know, promote that once we have a little bit more idea of the goals and desire for this event. And we do that via all of our internal and external channels here, like social media, our website. We use our media partners to help get the word out about that. We have you know, we'll have our internal messaging through ConnectEd and things like that that go out to families. So I think right now people are looking for those resources. So it really would be a good time to, we can talk about time as well. I don't know what month, Scott, you were thinking would be helpful to do this. Did you have anything in mind?
I personally would defer to Dr. McNeil since we're going to piggyback on one of her forums. So I think historically we've done them in the spring. Misty, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I know Dr. McNeil has heard the data across the state, and we have done deep dives into recent spikes in our youth data. The school districts are doing some amazing things, especially Washoe County, but we desperately need to get the parents in this room, in this conversation. And I thought the safety forum would be a beautiful opportunity. Thinking of lethal means safety, thinking of social media safety, some of these great topics that are so desperate. And I think the pandemic and Zoom will afford us a bigger audience. So I appreciate that, Megan. I look forward to this. I think April is the perfect time because we do see increases in mental health and suicide rates in April, May, but also there's flexibility there.
Thank you, Misty. And I would agree. I think just knowing what I know about suicide, I think if we can target it around that time when we see those peaks. Misty's the expert in that, but I think April and May are some good times. It looks like Dr. McNeil is ready to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I would imagine that would give our staff, you know, ample time to help out, put together. I'm thinking that, you know, more organizations have done virtual conferences and types of events. So I think we could, you know, put something that's high quality together. Paul, do you think like an April timeline would be doable as far as putting together with the mental health capacities and the forum?
I think so. We had such a great conference planned last year, and I'm hopeful because a couple of them are on this meeting right now, Natalie and Lorraine, that people will participate in the conference. I don't want to complicate it, and I see popped up, but Roy Anderson also has an obligation through his work, and that might be yet another piece to consider combining.
So Roy Anderson, emergency manager for the record. I'm actually speaking as the president of the Nevada Emergency Preparedness Association. We have been for the last 5 years conducting an annual preparedness summit. That part of that includes a school track with working with the Nevada Department of Ed to provide training for school personnel regarding emergency management, you know, mental health, you know, anything that involves, you know, school safety, emergency management kind of subjects. Unfortunately, it's tied in with the statewide emergency management and emergency preparedness conference, and some of the items aren't, you know, geared towards schools, and we don't really have a good attendance for school staff that show for the conference. So we, as the Nevada Emergency Preparedness Association, we approached the State Department of Ed to see if we can partner with them, with the Division of Emergency Management from the state, and the State Nevada Association of School Administrators to put together a conference, statewide conference on school safety that's just focused for schools. So we're looking at putting it together. April was kind of the time frame. So after legislation, you know, before the summer, I mean, graduation stuff hits us. So we're actually looking at seeing if we could put together a conference for that. Now that is geared towards school administrators and school personnel, not towards families that obviously we want to target with the school, you know, the safety forum, things like that. So we were actually, was asked by Kristen McGill, who is the state director or coordinator of mental health, safe and healthy schools, I think it is, to approach the group, to the commission, to see if it is something that you would like to be part of the planning and the putting together of the agenda and whatever else, you know, we would need for that conference. So that's another thing. I don't know if it, you know, obviously wouldn't be something that we want to put together with our school safety forum, but could be another avenue for the commission to help provide some help, you know, safe and healthy support for our students, staff members, and the state in general.
Yes, Dr. Lamarca.
So Roy brings up a very important point. So the trauma conference that was going to be conducted last spring, or the mental health wellness conference, that too was targeted more towards educators, not so much families. So we'll have to get creative. Maybe it's a multi-day event, or maybe it's organized well enough to where people opt into different things, which could include like a series for families and a different series for, educators.
I know historically at our safety forums, we've had breakout sessions. I don't know if that would be the appropriate avenue, that we have the welcome to, and then we have, I think it's been 15-minute sessions on different topics, and we've been able to navigate through the room. I don't know, Megan, if that's a possibility through the social media platforms to continue, and maybe that'd be one of the options. I don't know that 15 minutes is enough time to help our educators with trauma-informed care approaches. Yes, Dr. Patterson.
In my discipline, when we have meetings, we'll have sort of tracks, and sort of like the program will have a green track. So, if that's your area, you stick with the green. And so it might be that we can have a whole day event or a 2-day event, and we have tracks for different people that are interested in attending. So there'd be a family track and an educator track and that kind of thing.
I like that idea.
Is that possible, Megan?
Over Zoom, I know it is, and we can explore other avenues that we have as well. And I mean, I think the advantage of that is being able to publish it, right? Families don't always have a whole lot of time, but if they can look and hone in on exactly what they're seeking assistance for, especially, the educators need deeper information, obviously, but sometimes families just have specific questions that they're looking to get answered. So I think that could be a good way to address them.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, I think, the more flexible we can, as far as, and I like Dr. Patterson's idea of the tracks as far as the topics. I think that would work out really well. And, I know myself as a parent, even though I'm an employee of the school district, I would like to be able to attend both as a parent and then as an employee of the school district. So having that flexibility as well, too.
And I think this platform will give those that have the dual hats, if they want to attend the education track one day and then maybe on the weekend, go back and watch the recording on the parent information that was dispersed. I think that gives a good option to everybody. Dr. Nicolette.
I like that idea, Scott. And I think that much like you can go back and watch the trustee meetings. So I want us to remember our larger community too, our business partners, because more and more we need to collaborate, hear their voices, they need to hear our voices. And I could see this working maybe for the older student in high school, so that teachers can prepare to have their students join this as well, because I believe that their input is really important to us understanding the challenges that we are facing with safe and healthy schools and that wholeness of safe and healthy. So I think the different tracks I've presented a couple times recently, and it's been really a wonderful experience. And I know that it has been for other conferees to be able to participate in things that you're just curious about. And so I think we're onto something.
I would agree. I think we can make this work well. We have enough time to plan. I think time is of the essence, but if we start planning now, it can be successful.
I know that there will probably be, coming into January and February, also some interest from our board, as well as asking support from the commission on additional help on the traffic safety and pedestrian safety, and continuing to push that message out around whether those are through safety audits or something within the school zones, but just something else to keep going to.
So Megan, is there any direction that you need from us? Do we need to take action on anything? Maybe that's a question for Dr. LaMarca.
I'll let Paul weigh in. Is it an actionable item?
It's not.
Okay.
I don't think it was written for action, but I do think, Scott,
It
that we
was.
will. Oh, it was. Okay, good. I think we need, I know on the mental health side, depending on, we're far along the road if we redo what we were going to do last year in terms of planning, but we'll definitely need a planning committee. I don't think staff will be able to plan it without the expertise of commission members. So I don't know if now or later is the appropriate time, but if we could identify members who would be part of the planning groups, that would help us a lot.
Misty. And she's
I just
volunteering. And if now's the appropriate time, if you want to express interest, I think a committee would be an ideal situation to start now so that we can, in January, February, start promoting it and keeping it fresh. I like the student approach that was brought up. I really think getting the student voice involved, especially in the safety forum. I mean, if the teachers are informed and they have their students that understand what's really going on in the world that we're living in, I think the more information they have, the more at ease they might be at school and might understand how to reach each other and how to reach out for mental health help. I think it's a big elephant in schools, like mental health. It is a stigma if you reach out for help. But I think if we are all talking about it and making it a conversation that is easy to have, they can understand the resources as students and share them with those that need them. Yes,
Well,
Dr.
and we can let everybody know that we're all needing help right now. So in a way, we're all unique and not so unique, but I'll help. I'm on board.
Thank you.
Happy to help.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanchez. I appreciate that. And Megan, you can put me down. I am willing to help in whatever capacity is needed.
Fine. I'd be
Commissioner
happy to go ahead and put my name down too. Whatever I can do to help, let me know.
Thank you.
And I guess it would be helpful then to know if that planning committee could have a smaller meeting. I don't know in terms of public record law if we're permitted to do that or what that would look like. And then, just to be able to hash out some of the ideas. And then that way there would be, more direction for your next meeting.
Looks like Mr. Rombardo is going to speak.
Yeah, so we probably want to avoid having smaller committees, because if the smaller committee is advising the larger committee, then it would be considered a subcommittee that also has to comply with the open meeting law. And I don't think anybody has the staff time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with that, Neil, what would your recommendation be?
Well, you could have, so you're all frozen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, as long as you can hear me, because everyone stopped. So I wasn't sure if I was getting through. Great. My recommendation would be, I guess, that's a tough call because everyone wants to participate. I think we have to probably let Megan drive the focus along with perhaps the chair, and those who want to participate can then work individually with Megan or it could be an agenda item for the entire committee to be briefed as well. I just don't want to create subgroups, especially if they're going to come back and advise the committee. So that's the issue.
Okay.
Open meeting law is tough to deal with at times, so sorry about that.
So Chair and Neil, I'm wondering, would it be possible for the next Safe and Healthy Schools Commission, would we be able to do a work session type format to where we could really get down into the work of, and just have that be the topic of the agenda of the, safe and healthy schools at that point in time, but a work session on planning, have people bring their thoughts around what types of topics, but that way you could really get some of the work done. Just a suggestion.
We still have to comply with the open meeting law. Yeah, yes, that is possible. The reason why I'm hesitant is that the term work session doesn't really change what type of meeting it is. It does for our board because we have different terms that we've adopted over time, but for really purposes of the open meeting law, a meeting's a meeting. And so it'd be up to the chair to guide the conversation along with staff on here's our planning and here's the documents that we'd like to follow, but people will still be allowed to participate just like any other open meeting.
Okay.
Dr. Nicolette.
Thank you, Neil and Kristen. We always get it done when we do it together, right? So I think if Misty and Scott can develop, maybe along with Kristen and Megan, the agenda that can be broad enough, but yet make Neil comfortable with open meeting discussion so that we can, like Kristen suggested, let's make it I'm not going to use work meeting, make it a focused agenda to get some work accomplished.
I'm open to that. If the commission is open to that idea, I think that's possibly something we can take action on today, if that's the direction the commission wants to go.
I don't have your agenda in front of me. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it. It got lost in the shuffle of emails. Is this an action item?
It is. It says for possible action.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to make sure.
Yes. Commissioner Bybee?
I guess I'm understanding what Neil is saying, because it's a little different on council as long as we don't have a quorum, which for us is 3. This is a much bigger group, so your quorum is a larger amount. But I guess, Neil, you're saying because a subcommittee or a less than quorum amount of people that were working on specifics for this, for our safety forum, because we'd be bringing that to the group is what prohibits us from meeting separately. But the chair and vice chair could be working with Megan, and then Megan can directly give us assignments, or we need to do that in our next general meeting that's an open, publicly noticed meeting.
Yeah, so I think my answer to that whole thing is yes on either way you go, but here are the 2 ways. So the first way is that the chair and vice chair, because our board policies and regulations allowed them to manage the agenda along with staff, would be creating agendas for future board meetings, deciding how this would proceed, how the planning would go forward. The other way of doing it is with Megan, they could also work to develop a plan and then ask folks to follow through on those. I do think it is better to do it as Commissioner Nicolette said, and as the superintendent recommended, through a board meeting and adoption. And maybe that's the only item you have on the agenda so that you can talk at length about it. The concern with the smaller subcommittee is there is an AG opinion. It was actually against the Board of Regents of the university system, and actually the Washoe County School District had a similar violation way back before anybody on this meeting's time, just to be clear, that what happened is if members of a committee step off of the committee and start making decisions for the committee, then that is considered a subcommittee. And my concern would be if 3, 4, or 5 of you get together, which is not a quorum, but you sit down together or use Zoom and conduct a discussion. And during that discussion, you say, yeah, let's bring forward idea A, but we don't think idea B, whatever that is not a good one. Well, that's still a decision for the committee to make. And that would be a violation of the open meeting law, because you've made a decision for the commission without a majority. Or you would be what's considered an advisory committee, and you wouldn't have noticed that meeting and followed the open meeting law. And that's a common trip up that happens in a lot of jurisdictions. And so I'm probably being overly cautious, but since the school district, we have a tendency of getting a little higher degree of watching for whatever reason. I like to err on the side of being overly cautious. So I hope that all made sense. And if it didn't, I'll try again.
Yeah. No, it does. Thank you.
So I guess I will leave it open to everybody to decide what our next steps under the direction and guidance of our Chief General Counsel, what we should do. And certainly we don't have to take action on it today. I think if we just continue the conversation, I like that idea that we agendize this topic and the only topic being discussed at one of our meetings. I'd rather it be sooner than later, just so that we can make sure that we get an effective outreach to the people that need to know. Missy.
Chair Benton, may I make a motion?
Of course.
I would like to move that the chair and vice chair work with Megan Downs and Dr. McNeil to put together an agenda for a future meeting to focus on the safety forum, virtual safety forum. I'm guessing connected with a mental health forum as well. Is that what we're looking at?
Thank you, Misty, for the motion. Do I have a second?
Jim Nadeau was second.
Thank you, Jim. With a motion and a second, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Megan, I hope that was clear as mud for us on what our next steps should be. I just want to appreciate the conversation that we have.
That was great. Thank you. That's a lot to get us started, and we look forward to the next conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Dr. McNeil.
Absolutely. And Chair, may I request I do have an update on the agenda item 2.05 for the school numbering. Could you reopen item 2.05 so I can give you that update before we move on?
Absolutely. Let's go back to item 2.5, which is the presentation and discussion of the school safety audits and contract with the Safety Advisory Council, Advocacy Council. Dr. McNeil.
Thank you so much. So just as an update, a bid was put out and it was actually accepted at the October 13th Board of Trustees meeting for 22 schools in the amount of $119,714, which is being paid actually through our bond funds for the 2020 allocation plan. So 22 schools will receive the door numbering signage. I just wanted to give you all that update.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any discussion around that since we have opened the item before we close it again? Thank you, Dr. McNeil, for bringing that information to us. We're going to move on to our closing items, which is public comment 3.1. Again, if we can ask our recording secretary to read any names of those that have submitted public comment.
Chair Benton, there is no public comment at this time.
Thank you. Item 3.2 is our next meeting announcement. Our meeting is scheduled for Monday, December the 7th via Zoom. With that, I will adjourn the meeting at 3:51.